And today I'm here to talk about writing for children with Jane Clack and Bullen. And so let's get started. So start with Jane. So have a very brief, no pressure, a very brief bio. So Jane has always loved children's books and was constantly surrounded by them growing up. It was always her ambition to write, but life seemed to keep getting in the way.
Absolutely.
But now you have at least 8 books by my count, so obviously you managed to get around those obstacles. So
Yes.
how did you succeed in doing that then?
Well, it was quite simple. Retired. So I suddenly found that I had more time on my hands, and my husband is extremely active and he's always wanting to go off playing basketball and playing tennis. I am quite the opposite. I enjoy reading, writing, and so I found that I had more time to do the things that I love. And I also found that when I had more time on my hands, I started to get inspiration, because I firmly believe that everybody has it in them. Everybody has an idea, or they have something that they could write about. It's just knowing how to start it, or how to begin the process, and how to get inspiration in the first place. And inspiration is a funny thing, because sometimes you think, oh, I've got no more ideas, and then somebody will just say something, or you'll just see something, and a little light bulb will light up in your head, and you think, I know what my next book's going to be about. And actually, I do sometimes think that starting writing a book is actually quite the straightforward thing. It's all the rest of it that comes afterwards, and once you've actually started on that process.
Right. So what was the let's say the most unusual inspiration you had then for one of your books? That was hoping you weren't going to go with that one. So I don't know. Can you maybe tell the title if anyone can't see that?
Harp and Trump of Windy Bottom. I had a spaniel that I loved dearly. He was actually quite a revolting creature by everybody else's standards, but he had a very unfortunate problem. We just could never ever solve it, and so basically Mr. and Mrs. Bogbrush became the proud owners of a fine litter of puppies, and they were overjoyed. However, their happiness is marred when a terrible smell appears in the kitchen. Even the plumber, Mr. Blowowski, was unable to direct the source of the problem, etc., etc. I have another book over there which is called The Discombobulator, and I love silly words. And I remember I was sitting once, and there was a woodpecker, and it was drilling on a downpipe which was metal, and I thought, gosh, what on earth's that bird doing? And my friend said, oh, it's discombobulated, and it was just that word that made me think, discombobulated, I'm going to write a book about that. So it's just things like that.
Right. Okay. And so Anne Bullen. So Anne's now retired from a career of 30 years in education, lives in Nasborough. And the local beauty of the landscape, seen daily, was the inspiration for your debut book, which you published this year, I believe, in January.
In January,
is that right?
yeah.
So you have quite a story about this, I believe, it was on your LinkedIn page, maybe I saw it, or on your Amazon page, can't
Probably
remember.
my LinkedIn page,
Right.
yes, I don't put anything on it.
Okay. But maybe you could take us through that, sort of the process and the inspiration for the story.
Well, we live in a glorious place to start, and I've brought 4 boys up living there, and we've overlooked a farmer's field, and year in, year out, every season, it's always been joyous, really, to observe what goes on there, all the different animals that the farmer brings in, all the wildlife, the flowers, the trees. The seasons make it look different, and one of my sons said it's the best field in England. Wherever we've gone, no, our field's the best. Always calls it our field, although it isn't. So I just thought one day I might just write a story about it, but it didn't mean anything at the time. And again, like Jane, retirement came along, just as the lockdown started really. So I found I did have time on my hands. My son had moved out, one of my boys had moved out, so I turned his room into an art studio because I love painting. I love a lot of craft work, so it was a good space. But the best thing was it overlooked the field, so I was able to really observe. Got the binoculars out. Yeah, used to go and climb over the gate and walk around a little bit. Hopefully the farmer wouldn't spot me, but managed that. Yeah, so I painted a picture, a really quirky picture of all the animals I'd seen. Not to scale, the pheasant was 2 times larger than the cow. The magpie was the size of an emu, but it just looked good. And I showed it to my best friend, an ex-partner in the nursery, and she said it looks like the cover of a book. I thought, oh, it does. So that got me thinking. So I thought, I'll have a go. So very simple story, because my background's early years, and I've read hundreds of books to children over the years, and I know what children like. They like a jolly story, they like a story that rhymes, they like a story with alliteration and repeated verse so they can join in, all of those things. And also books that they could get their hands on and do something with, so slightly interactive there. So after a lot of thinking, I decided my main character would be a cow. And
Is there any reason why?
I love cows.
Okay.
I just love cows, and the farmer has the most amazing herd, and they're all different colours. But my favourite was this black and white cow, and I called her Cora. And there's a bit of a story later on with that as well. So she became my main character, and it was springtime. Well, it wasn't actually. It was still winter. So I thought I'll start this story in autumn and sort of work it towards winter. So that's how it started, and it just sort of came out very simply.
So you did the illustrations for your entire book?
I did. Once I'd got this story plotted out, I thought it's only over 12 pages, short and sweet, no more than 4 lines on each page. So I started painting, and it took me 5 months to do the paintings, and I treated it like a job. Went into the studio, started painting, have breaks and come back. And once I'd finished them all, that was it. I didn't do any more for a couple of months really. But then I decided to do nature notes on all the animals and the birds and the flora in the field. So it became a book of 2 halves, the fiction part and the non-fiction part.
So you have the non-fiction to supplement the fiction,
Yeah.
so educational.
And I thought then it would support educators and parents as well, if they wanted to further the child's interest and, in development in literacy or in learning about, the world around
Cows
it. So that's how it came into that format.
Yeah, excellent. So, I mean, Anne did all the illustrations of her own book, but you have a number of different illustrators. Where did you find your illustrators? Because that is one of the issues that children's authors typically have, is they write all their stories, and then you're like, well, how do I find an illustrator, especially one that I can afford?
It's really, really tough, and I was very lucky. First of all, I have to say I'm so envious of Anne, but also I know a few people who are writers and illustrators, and it's wonderful. It's, to have that talent. I'm extremely jealous, but in all the best ways. I was very lucky because my daughter had a school friend, who was very, very talented. And she had just finished university. She'd had a rough time because she'd had various issues going on, and she was looking for some work. And I bumped into her mum in Lidl, I think it was, and we were just chatting. And I said, I've just written a book, but I don't know where to go next. I really need an illustrator. And she said, well, Lucy's just finished university and she's looking for work. So I said, oh, that's fantastic. So I contacted Lucy, and she actually has illustrated 6 books. There are a couple I haven't got here. Then she became a victim of her own success, and she became too busy, and then she went and got married and had a baby. How inconsiderate. And I said, oh, but can you illustrate another book? And she said, I just haven't got time, but I've got somebody who's been working for me on a government grant scheme, and she's called Olivia, and she can help you out on your next one. And Olivia has a completely different style, but she's worked extremely well. And then a friend of ours,
Okay. I was wondering if that was the same name.
yeah, another friend of mine who runs an organisation called Promoting Yorkshire Authors. I approached him about doing this one because he has a very sort of quirky style, and I thought that would suit that better. However, I have got a book that I wrote 5 years ago, and I asked somebody to illustrate it, and he's still illustrating it. It's not this person, he's still illustrating it, and I don't know what to do really. I just have to be patient and just keep cajoling, but it's tough, and I think it's nice if you know an illustrator and you know how each other ticks and how you work together, because you could find, and that's why you're in such a fantastic position, Anne, because you could find somebody who produces something you think, oh no, that's not remotely what I had in mind, but then sometimes you just strike lucky. So I think I was quite lucky.
So if it's not getting too, I don't know, into the personal finance size, but typically like an illustrator can cost a lot depending on illustrators.
Yeah.
Has that been your situation, or has they been fairly reasonably priced?
So when I first started out, obviously my first book, which was Oscar the Osprey, Lucy and I came to an arrangement, and like Anne, I'm a retired teacher. So I used to, before COVID, I used to go into schools and run workshops. I would still do that if I had the opportunity, but budgets are getting crushed all the time, and it's harder and harder to do that. But we had an arrangement, and I said, look, I can't pay you up front because I don't have that kind of money. And she said, no, that's fine. And what we did, and this is the level of trust that we had, we decided that I would, when I broke even on the printing costs, I'd then split proceeds in a certain way, and we worked like that for quite a long time. Now she's going to be doing my next book. She's going to start working in September, and we're going to actually come to a more formal arrangement. With this, I did have to pay, and I can't. I'm not being coy here. I can't. I've got a terrible head for figures. I'm great with words, terrible with figures, but it cost me quite a lot of money to illustrate.
So in addition, I'm just back to Anne for a second. So in addition to the illustration, obviously, publishing itself and having it printed and published is another issue. Now you've, Anne, have worked for, I know how to pronounce it, Grosvenor House? Is that how you say it?
Grosvenor.
Grosvenor? Okay, Grosvenor House Publishing?
Grosvenor House
So you worked with
Publishing.
them, did you?
I worked with them.
What was that experience like then?
Well, it took me a while to decide on them, not because, for any particular reason. With my book, I wanted it to be interactive, obviously, and my idea was to have the cow as a bookmark on a piece of cord coming down out of the book.
Maybe you can show the
yes,
audience.
Yes, I will. I'll just
You can hold
turn
it if you
the
want.
page. Thank you. So as you can see at the moment, there's just the shadow of the cow on each page. I produced a mock-up to send to the publisher when I decided on Grosvenor House. And in my original mock-up, I had the cow in slots, little slots, so you could physically move the cow that way, but it would have been attached to a piece of cord. I read all the testimonials about the publishers, and Grosvenor House seemed to be the one that could do this. So went through all the rigmarole of getting on board, like you do, and they had all my paintings. I had to scan them. They had the mock-up, and after a little while they got back to me and said that it's causing some problems having this slot, and the publisher manager came up with the idea of having a cow printed on a page as by way of an activity, so it could be cut out by the child and placed on the page. And I thought, how are we going to do that? I like the cow in a certain position, so they said, what about a shadow? So lots of what do you call them, experiments took place. Lots of coming and goings. How about this? How about that? And in the end, it was the shadow that was decided on. So if I can just show you, I've got a couple I made earlier. Yes, there you go. The child, at the back, there are some activities. Again, this is what sparked. I think I will get there in the end. I will get there. Right, there's the cutout of the cow. So the idea is you cut out the cow, pop some card in between, laminate it or whatever, and the idea of the cow is the same size as the shadows of the cow in the illustration. So it completes the picture and it gives the child something to do as well. And I've actually put it to test because I was invited to a local nursery. I sent out a few of my books to local nurseries, and I was invited to go along and read it. And I thought, oh, how's this going to work? Well, all the children were there with their cut-out cows and books, and they were, every time I turned the page, they'd wave their cows up in the air. And they started to join in with the repeated refrain as well, which was lovely. So, in that regard, the publishers were really, really helpful. And the reason why he suggested having it printed on a page was to be able to generally publish the book rather than just being a limited edition for myself and my family, which was all I did it for in the first place, just me and my family, as a little bit of a legacy, if you like, and a reminder of where we grew up and where we've lived over all the years. So that was how it came to be printed on a page, which led me to think, well, okay, if there's one activity, why don't we have more? So I knew the kind of activities that children between the ages of 2 and 4 up to 5 would do. Simple animal and baby matching activities, you know, helping the cow get to the barn, spotting Clover the cow in amongst all those. So yeah, the book got larger and larger as time went by. So it was completed in the end, and all along the publishers were really, really helpful. The only snag was the publisher administrator only worked part-time. So if I sent you know, a copy of something or an example of something I'd like included, it would take almost a week to get feedback. Well, that changed come September, and another lady took over and she was at work full-time, so things really sped up after that, and she was really on the ball with it all. So yeah, it finally got published in January, so it took a whole year from contacting the publisher to a publishing date. So I wouldn't say that there were any real snags at all, apart from the initial problem of presenting the book how I originally wanted it, with the slot. In fact, I think it worked out worked out better because it provided more ideas.
Yeah. Inspired the rest of the book,
Inspired the rest
then,
of
isn't
the
it?
book,
Yeah.
yes, to complete it, yeah.
So it was a bit of a process, though, a full year.
It was a process.
Yeah.
And I tell you what used to get me, all the copy editing and the reading it through, making sure that everything was right. And it wasn't until
Isn't it?
just before it was published, I ordered a fair few copies, and I gave one to my dearest friend and partner in early years, of 25 years, and the deer in the book is called Diana, after Diana. And I gave her the book, and she was reading it, and she said, I thought the name of the cow was Clover. I said, it is. She said, well, there's still the name Cora on the second line. So after all this time, and after going through it time and time again, I still missed out that one name. Because to me, when I read it, it meant nothing because it was Cora to start with. So I got the name Cora in my head. So, and the times I've gone around crossing out.
Do you know that, I think, because there are a few authors in this room, I think that's a lesson that we've all learned, and that is get lots of people
Yes.
get lots of people to read, because you
Yes.
become blind to your own mistakes,
Yeah.
do.
and you just don't
Yeah.
see them.
You don't.
No,
I thought, how have I missed it? I felt
Yeah.
so foolish. I
it's
really did.
frustrating.
Imagine
Yes,
if you're
I
doing a
have.
novel, how much more you have to do as well.
So I had all these books with a mistake in. So I added an amendment slip. And
Okay.
those are the ones I sent out to all the preschools. I didn't charge them for.
Okay. That's one way to do it, I guess, yeah.
I
So,
could-
so yeah, what was
sorry,
your experience with
I was
publishing?
going to say, I could tell you a similar story. There was a book, I haven't got it here with me, and this I haven't told many people this. And what happened was, it went off to the printers and it came back, and the printers had somehow, or somebody had, I don't know if it was me or whether it was the printers, but they'd somehow got the pagination wrong, and there was a map on 2 inside pages, and basically what had happened was the pagination had gone wrong, so half of the map was on one side and half of the map was on the next side. So I had a
so
similar
you had a
thing.
similar
I
thing.
went and gave a load to the school and said, I'll just have
have
them.
them.
But it was that, you know, when you open it and you think, oh my Lord, goodness me. Yeah.
So, how do you publish your books then? You have a local printer? Is that how you work, or because you don't use Amazon, clearly, something like that?
I
Because
do with my later books.
I have the new ones, okay. Because I see
So-
that you sell them from your website
Yes.
primarily.
So I was actually saying to somebody earlier on, actually, I think it might have been to Kate, yeah, that I go to various printers, and I was doing backflips about 3 years ago because I found this printer in London, and they were really reasonable and they produced really good quality books. But recently, and it's the same with Amazon as well, if you're an author, with Amazon, you'll have had these emails. Sorry? Oh, I thought somebody said something. The printing costs have just gone up exponentially, so basically it's a case of shopping round. But I do have some of my books with Amazon, and then I have a certain amount of stock as well. But I have less stock now because the printing costs are really rocketing.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you go through the non-Amazon printers, you have to go through a. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I'm focusing this way, I think. So I'm just asking her if she goes through the non-Amazon printers, for example, what kind of stock do you have to keep of the books? Like, what's sort of lowest print run that you could have?
Once upon a time, can you hear me? Yes, I can. Yeah. Once upon a time, there used to be a print run, and it used to be based on the number of copies that you printed. So obviously, the more books you ordered, the cheaper the print. Well, it was expensive, but your unit cost was cheaper. Now, more and more printers, fortunately are going more down the sort of unit cost price. So, for example, about 3 years ago when I found this publisher in London, I was, as I say, doing backflips because I could order a smaller amount. I could order, say, 25 copies, which I could sell quite easily. And the price wasn't really based on having a huge print run. In the early days, with my very first book, Oscar the Osprey, I ordered 500.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I've still got a few. And it's a lot. It was a lot of money to spend. Plus I had, my husband was always saying, what are these books doing here? I had to sort of have them wedged into a corner of a room. So, yeah.
Become part of the furniture, perhaps.
Yes, you can disguise them with a nice sort of tablecloth, put a coffee cup on top.
So you're saying a lot of the printers then are becoming sort of print on demand then?
They are starting to follow that model a bit more, and I think it's because they've had to become more competitive. But printing costs have, it's like your energy costs. Everything's going up exponentially at the moment, which is going to have an impact, I think, sadly, on the unit price of books, sadly.
Right. Have you noticed when you went to Amazon from the printers, from the local, I want to call them local printers, but you were in London, so that's not very local. Did you notice a difference in options? Because when I went through Amazon with this, there's not a lot of options, which is why a lot of them become square or portrait mode versus the ones you'll see in the libraries.
Yeah, I have to confess, because I'm a real technophobe, I'm really bad with computers. So Lucy was holding my hand, and one of her assistants was holding my hand a lot of the time. So, for example, this one, this actually isn't printed by Amazon, but if I ordered that on Amazon, it would be the same size. So there are printing options, but then it becomes quite baffling because you have to know about the gram, of the paper, and then your print formats, and the actual colour of the background paper. It's quite baffling, really. It's a steep learning curve.
Right.
So,
how long did you think it took you to get over that learning curve then?
I haven't.
You still haven't?
I haven't. I'm still learning. And again, I was having this conversation earlier and saying it's just a constant learning curve, and there are mistakes that you make, there are things that you think, well, I wouldn't do that again. Sometimes you look at something which is your pride and joy when you produce it, and then you look at it again about 3 years later and you think, I'd have done that slightly differently. So it's just a constant learning curve, I think.
Right. Did you have any? You presumably didn't have the same issues with an actual publisher.
With mine, I painted all my pictures on A4. So when I went along with Grosvenor House Publishing, I was given several choices of what size I wanted the book, what shape, square, rectangular, hardback, softback. So I had quite a few choices. Obviously the prices varied, so I knew what to expect. There were a few problems for them, namely these little bits on your paper, which altered the size of their printing, but they were very good, I must say. But like Jane's saying, it was a real learning curve. They'd send me things, say, can you just do this? And I think, how on earth do I do that?
Don't do that.
But I was given guidance, sort of screenshots of what to do, which I felt was really helpful. So we did get there eventually. And Grosvenor House Publishing do it print on demand.
Okay,
So that's how I went forward. But I can buy them directly from them at a discount for my own sales, marketing, etc. Otherwise, it's bookshops, Amazon, Waterstones, not just here, but worldwide.
Right.
So yeah.
So I'm curious what, in terms of pricing, because that's obviously an issue. As an independent author, you need to be competitive in the market with the pricing. And I've noticed for children's picture books that the traditionally published, the big names, are very competitive in pricing. And so how do you price your books to compete with that?
Well, they just suggested a price to me. I thought, that sounds good.
Okay.
So I went for it. I thought it was expensive. I thought, oh, would I pay that much? I thought, well, it's hardback. There's a lot going on in it. And the publisher administrator said, I think it's brilliant. She said, I'd pay that much for that book. So I thought, right, well, that's good enough for me.
Do you know, it's really quite interesting because I've done quite a few showcases or, you know, gone to places where I've tried to sell books quite successfully face to face. And it's quite interesting because I have found that if people decide that they like your book, they don't actually always ask the price. And I think you have to be able to justify, if somebody queries the price, I think you just have to be able to justify the fact that, for me, I'm a small indie author, so I've done everything on my own, and so I have to make some kind of profit to make it worthwhile. Sounds awful, doesn't it? But
Not really, why should it?
yeah, but I suppose you have to be able to make a little bit, more in my case, so that I can then go on and think about the next one. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, isn't it? You make money on one, even if you're not in it to make a lot of money, you want to make enough money that you can produce the next one, essentially.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
Some of the booksellers as well, if you take your book to a private, you know, an independent bookshop, they'll want 35%, 40% of the cost of the book as well. Waterstones is 40%, which is quite high.
Yeah.
And also retailers have the option to either reduce the price, the suggested retail price, or increase it. I noticed Amazon had knocked £2 off mine just a week after it's been published. I thought, why is that?
Often the bookstores can also send it back, the unsold versions as well, can't
yeah.
they? Yeah. So, yeah, you don't make a lot of money in the bookstores as an independent author, do you?
No.
No. So pricing brings me to another issue, which is in the novel world is ebooks, but in children's picture books, this is a whole different. Well, as we say, I'm across the pond, a whole different ball game. So, have you made any moves into ebooks? What's your impression of children's picture content books as an ebook? There's presumably not much market, but I'm just curious what your.
Personally, I think that picture books for children are picture books, and the whole point of books is to be able to pick them up and share them and talk. And you have the interactive stuff, and then, you know, with both our books there's educational stuff at the back, so you can spend ages going to them and you can revisit them. I think maybe if it's a children's book and it's maybe that which is for a slightly older child, it might work better. My last few books are produced as an ebook as well, but I think the sales for the physical copies are way outweigh the ebooks. I think what I've noticed recently actually is that more and more people are looking for audio books.
Of the children's content as well.
Well, I think more for sort of grown-up books, but I can almost foresee that it's going to trickle down. With people wanting audiobooks, they can sort of plug in and, you know, disconnect.
Oh, that'll be something to think about, I guess, for
Yeah.
kids' books. But then it becomes almost like a cartoon or something at that point, doesn't it? So that brings us obviously to marketing, any author's favorite activity. So you have your books, you've published your books, you've gone through the whole process of learning how to write them, learning how to produce them, learning how to publish them. What's the marketing like for you?
It's wonderful. Not.
Without the sarcasm now.
Well, I don't really know what to do at all, although there's a company you can go through that will help you, that I was put onto through Grosvenor House Publishing, but I haven't used it because it costs a lot of money, of course. So I just ordered posters, postcards. I put a little bit of my own blurb on the back of the postcards, and I dropped them off at the doctor's surgery, the dentist, the vet. The vet had loads because it was all animals, of course. They took several books off me and it went down very well at the vet. I sent some round to preschools and nurseries and schools. But that's as far as I've got, really. I haven't done anything else. A little bit on LinkedIn. I haven't set up a web page. I didn't really intend any of this at all. It was just from 4 boys, my brother and my nephew, and that was it.
Yeah, I did have trouble finding you and contacting you, to be honest.
No, I like to be, what's the word?
But Jane, you have a
Anonymous.
website, and you do actually sell your books from your website.
I do, but
What other marketing do you do then?
I use social media. Yes, so it's Facebook, Instagram. I was thinking I ought to get to grips with TikTok, but I just don't think I could. I have Twitter, but I seldom use it. I think Instagram's quite good. I go to indie bookshops. Some of them are a lot more helpful than others. I try to participate in this kind of thing, joined promoting Yorkshire authors, because I just thought if there's a team of us together, then we can help each other and try to create opportunities. So, for example, organising face-to-face events where we can try and showcase our books and sell our books. I've just recently put my book forward for an award.
So how would you divide up your time between marketing and writing then at this stage? Do you have any kind of a plan, sort of, or is it random?
I'm really haphazard, seat of the pants, and I try to post things on social media, and I try to engage with people just so that they know that I'm there. But what I like best is the creative stuff. I like to sit down and write. I don't like the marketing stuff. If there's somebody out there who is really good at marketing and they don't charge a lot of money, come and talk to me, please.
But it takes so much
I'll give
time.
it to you.
That's the challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
of course it's
And
going
it's
to cost a lot of
knowing,
money.
it's, all the hashtag stuff and, all that malarkey. Yeah.
Right. So what would you say, well, we'll start with Anne first, the most rewarding thing about publishing a children's picture book then?
Just seeing it arrive through the door, look. I opened the box and I thought, I've done it. It was such an personal achievement, something I'd been promising myself to do for years, and a gift from a family. And just seeing it all in book form.
Right.
But then getting the response from the publishers and other family and friends, it was quite thrilling.
Has it inspired you to think about a second one?
Well, I've thought about it, but I thought, I've got to do more paintings. Because this is set from autumn to winter, and Clover the cow goes to the barn for winter. I thought, what happens when she comes back to the field in springtime? She may have a calf with her. There'll be rabbits and lambs and daffodils and bluebells. So maybe, you know, the next 2 seasons.
Excellent.
Summer and spring and summer. I don't know.
Excellent. Yourself, what do you find most
Again,
rewarding?
that moment when you get your box and you open it and you think, it's there, it's there. And sharing them with children, and
Yes.
when you see children really enjoying them, and also when people actually choose your book, when they pick up your book and they say, oh yes, and I've had people sometimes and they've bought 4, and it's just incredible. It's the most wonderful feeling. You think, oh well, it's nice to know that somebody appreciates what you've created.
Right.
And my grandchildren.
Yes.
Yeah, my grandchildren.
It's funny, following on from that, I don't have grandchildren. All my boys are grown up, and I haven't stepped foot in a nursery since I retired 3.5 years ago. But when I was invited to Kids at Heart Nursery in Lingerfield, I walked in, and as I said, all the children, 24 children, all sat on their own cushions, all with their little cows. And I thought, this is the audience I've written it for, apart from my own family. And to see their faces and the conversation it sparked afterwards, and you know what little ones are like.
Oh yeah.
You know, I had all these stories about what had happened to cows on their farm, and it's a very farming community anyway. But that was lovely to get the feedback from the audience that I really aimed the book at. That was special.
Yeah.
And they've invited me back
Oh, excellent.
because they were doing a display of all the animals in the book. So they've invited me back to see all the animal displays.
lovely.
So I'm
That's
looking
lovely.
forward to that.
So have you had either of you had a lot of feedback from children then who have read the books?
Yeah, grandchildren of my friends, they're good feedback.
Yes, I've got the 2 books that are waiting to be illustrated and put together. I've got some input from children who've written little comments. It's lovely, really nice. It means more getting the children's feedback than it does actually
Yes.
getting the adults'
Yeah.
feedback,
Right,
because
yeah.
they know, don't
They're
they?
the target audience.
Yeah,
as well.
exactly.
Have the children ever given you ideas for any future books?
Yes. Oh, yes. Because I used to teach 2 of my books, which I didn't bring. It was from a class of Year 3 children, and we were talking. We were writing. We were describing fantasy settings and fantasy creatures, and that's where I got the inspiration. I said to the kids, "You've actually inspired me to go and write a book." So it goes both ways.
Excellent. Have you been inspired then to get onto the next book, next season?
There's always inspiration. I need the motivation, time. I do have time on my hands, but now my husband's retired as well. We're having to do more things.
Gets in the way now, right?
Yeah, it gets in the way now. So yeah, it could be fitting it around various things, but yeah, I would not rule it out. But like you say, this inspiration comes from what somebody says, what you see, probably when you're not expecting it, and then ding.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, we'll turn questions over to the audience in a moment, but before we do, perhaps you can tell us where we might find you, if you have a website or don't have a website, where we might find you online, and maybe if you have another book coming out soon, what that might be. You're on LinkedIn, we know
I'm
that.
on LinkedIn. That's as much as I'm on. I could do a website.
I build websites as part of
You
my
build
business.
websites as
Very
well.
inexpensive, as we can have volunteers in the audience say. So. Shameless plug.
Yeah, don't know.
Jane?
Apart from
Oh,
LinkedIn, sorry.
No, go on, no, go ahead.
That's it.
I have got a website, janeclack.co.uk or janeclack.com, and I'm on Instagram and I'm on Facebook. My Facebook author page, they've done something a bit peculiar with that, so I tend to use my personal one more now, because the author one, I don't know, a bit strange. And I have got some cards if anybody would like one afterwards.
And your books are available for sale on your website.
They're available for sale on my website, and some of the latest ones are on Amazon as well.
Okay.
But it's better if you come to me, because then Amazon don't get their cut.
Yeah. I'm on Amazon and Waterstones, and my email is bullen@gmail.com, and I can send out
out
copies.
some. Excellent.
Oh, and I have got 2 new books coming out, but, well, one of them, as I say, it was written 5 years ago, so it was supposed to be written printed 5 Christmases ago, so who knows. But the next picture book, hopefully, it's about a dragon. Hopefully, I don't know, 2024 maybe.
Excellent. So if the audience has any questions for our guests, anything you'd like to know about picture books for kids or potentially other writing for children?
Have you tried newspapers for reviews? Some months ago, Guardian, and I always read the reviews of your books, and they have a children's section.
I haven't personally. I think as an indie author, it's good to try. So I'm going to take on board what you've said. But as an indie author, people often will say they can be a little bit sniffy. But they can be a bit sniffy.
No, it's true. It's true. As an indie author,
if you're a David Walliams, or if you're somebody like David Walliams, or you're already a celebrity or something, then they'll do that. But if it's just life.
It's all about marketing for them as well, isn't
Yeah.
it? And money. So the companies provide. Same with the bookstores, right?
Same with the bookstores.
You have to pay to get into the bookstores.
Yeah. And as you were saying, that with bookshops, with the commissions, they take it's normally 35 to 40%. Yeah. So.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I would. I do the illustrations first.
And I wouldn't, because I'm not an illustrator. So it's just there's probably no there are probably no hard and fast rules in that respect. I mean, if you are an author illustrator, well, fantastic, because you can do what you want. I'm an author, so I've tried to draw before and people have just laughed. So I write the words and then I speak to the illustrator. So it just, depends on your... No. Publishers, no. If you're approaching publishers, you would submit your text. In Anne's situation, I'm presuming that you would actually submit your illustrations, unless you'd done both.
I've done both.
Yeah.
They had the illustrations separately. I had to scan those without text, but then I did my own little mock-up to sort of put the ideas in their head as to how I wanted it to look.
There is a book called, I think it's called The Authors and Illustrators Guide, and they release it every year, and so they list all the top publishers, and they also they also list all the agencies that deal with illustrators as well. So that's quite a handy guide if you want to look at that. They also, there is something called vanity printers, vanity publishers,
Yeah.
and they are the kind of publishers that will tell you that your product is great, and they say that they will do it for you, but then they will ask you for a lot of money, and they are vanity publishers, and there's nothing wrong with doing it. If you want to spend your money on having something created, then that's fine. It's just that some people say that it can be a little bit of a scam. However, in the children's illustrators and that book I just spoke about, there is a company in York that actually has a good reputation that will actually put your material together and create that for you, and I think they're deemed to be very legitimate. So
this is one of the things you have to do your research on, isn't it? Because some, like Jane says, some of them are just terrible. They'll just take your money for a really bad product. But then you have Anne's experience with Grosvenor House, which some might list in that category, but clearly are not, because they worked very closely with you on every stage.
Yeah.
So they're clearly a different category.
I'm so happy with them.
yeah.
Just from personal perspective regarding illustrations, I'm going a different way as well. I use stock photos, so if you want to see what that looks like, you can have a look at the book over there. I'm also playing around with generative AI for my next book, so we'll see what that works like. But I don't want to put any illustrators out of business or anything. So, so there are lots of options, and you just go with one that works for you, basically. Is there any other questions? Okay, if not, then I'd like to thank Jane and Anne.
Thank you.
Thank you.